Meanwhile, there's this.
I want to tell you and your people, you're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine. You've taken our weapons and you've kicked their ass. And I'm very proud to have you as our ally. So, what do I think? Complete, utter disaster. Somebody asked me, am I embarrassed about Trump? I have never been more proud of the president. I was very proud of J.D. Vance, standing up for our country. We want to be helpful. What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again. I think most Americans saw a guy that they would not want to go in business with. The way he handled the meeting, the way he confronted the president was just over the top. He either needs to resign and send somebody over that we can do business with, or he needs to change.
Lindsey Graham twisting and contorting once again, all for the benefit of Donald Trump. I must tell you, my last meeting with John McCain, there were two things that were on his mind. One was the continuing threat from Vladimir Putin, which he talked about at great length, and brought up the names of all the political leaders that Vladimir Putin had killed and all the treaties that he had broken. And the second was his heartbreak with Lindsey Graham for basically selling out all of his values for a round of golf with Donald Trump.
The first sound we heard there from Lindsey Graham was just 2 weeks ago at the Munich Security Conference. That's when he praised Zelensky, sitting alongside him, saying he was a model ally. And then the last bit was Friday after the meeting, where Graham, like so many members of the Trump cabinet, looked like they were handed talking points. They all took to Twitter. They all praised Trump. They all thanked Trump for how tough he was in that meeting. That includes Secretary of State Rubio.
Do you think Marco got out of his days to actually type in the words that were handed to him, or do you think somebody did?
I suspect someone on the Secretary's staff.
I mean, seriously, you really was. It was when the question was asked about the suit. It really was. You can see that was a soul-crushing experience for a lifelong Russia hawk.
The question asked by a reporter from a conservative outlet let into the Oval Office because of how the White House has changed the press pool access. Mind you, that reporter also dating Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And we had two distinct reactions, Ian, in that Oval Office. We saw Marco Rubio look like he wanted to disappear into the couch itself because, to Joe's point, he's someone whose whole career has been someone who has tried to stand up to Russia. In that moment, he had to go along with the president. We also saw the Ukrainian ambassador at the top of our show sink her head in her hands because she knew what a disaster that meeting was. The meeting after the Oval Office canceled early. There was no news conference, no minerals deal signed. Lunch went uneaten.
Yeah, and then, of course, the reaction from Europe, the reaction from Keir Starmer, the British people, Ian, lined up in the streets, cheering, like I suppose Americans used to, cheering for Zelensky, cheering for freedom. Keir Starmer saying, we're with you. King Charles III, you notice, wasn't shocked at all that he dressed like a wartime leader, as Churchill dressed like a wartime leader. And then, of course, the people of Europe, the leaders of Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, having the strongest words of support. Talk about that, and what does it mean long-term for the United States, long-term for Europe, long-term for Ukraine?
Look, Trump sees Ukraine not as an ally, not as a courageous leader. He sees Zelensky as a supplicant. He sees him as weak, and America gets to make the rules. No different in that regard than the way he'd see the Panamanian leader or the Danish leader or the Mexican leader or the Canadian leader. These are people that have to come to him and who have to jump when he says jump. And the fact that the Ukrainians have fought for 3 years is irrelevant from Trump's perspective. He wants to end the war. That is the priority. It's the only priority.
And why is he calling Zelensky, why is he calling the victim the tyrant and the dictator, and calling the invader, refusing to call the invader the invader?
He wants to do a deal with Putin. He's made that very clear. What's interesting here, it's not just the decisive break with Ukraine. It is the fact that the Americans, the President of the United States and his administration, and the Russian president actually have strategic alignment on Europe. They both want a weak European Union, a fragmented European Union. They don't see them as principal allies of the United States. They see them as a challenge. This started with Munich a couple of weeks ago when the vice president, J.D. Vance, running the delegation, went and he said, you are the problem. You in this room, not Russia, not China, not Iran, you in this room, by being opposed to democracy, opposed to free speech, opposed to a party that you consider to be a neo-Nazi party. That was the beginning. And the conclusion was what we saw transpire in the Oval Office on Friday, when the same vice president and President Trump said, we are not going to support you. We're in between. We're going to cut a deal with Russia. That's going to be the end of the war. So if you're Europe, you better stand up. You've had years to stand up. You haven't been. You don't stand up now, you are in very serious trouble.
And of course, Mika, Europe paying more money to Ukraine in the defense of Ukraine to the United States. That's one of the lies that was told repeatedly last week. The other lie, that the United States has given $350 billion to Ukraine. That's a lie. We've given we've appropriated half of that. We've probably given, in the end, about a third of that. A lot of that money going to American factories, to American workers, to American jobs, to American munitions. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that, by the way, though, this is a continuation of Donald Trump attacking constantly democratically elected leaders in Europe in the first term, and then saying extraordinarily nice things about dictators like Vladimir Putin, autocrats like Orban in Hungary. And that continues today.
David Ignatius, your response to this meeting, European reaction, and whether or not this was just a complete and total gift to Putin.
So, Mika, Lindsey Graham had it right when he said it was a complete and utter disaster. It was a kind of piece of television that I don't think any of us have ever watched or imagined we would from the Oval Office. The question for me now is whether it's possible to pick up the pieces, and if so, how. It's really striking to look at the reactions 3 days later. The Kremlin is delighted. The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said that U.S. policy is now largely aligned with that of Russia. Can you imagine that? That's the description from the Kremlin of where things stand. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer, the head of what's traditionally our closest ally, Britain, is trying desperately, I think, to find a way to mediate between Zelensky and Trump, and see if there's a way back towards having the kind of peace deal that they envisioned. I'm told that
David,
Zelensky,
what's your reaction? I'm curious. What's your reaction to how much of a break this has been for U.S. policy going back over the past 80 years?
So I think in terms of rhetoric, it's a fundamental break. Is it going to last? My own guess is that over the next few weeks we'll see an attempt to resolve these differences. Ukrainian sources have told me that Zelensky is eager to get back into a dialogue with the U.S. He came to the White House ready to sign a deal to turn over much of the proceeds of Ukraine's mineral wealth to the United States as part of an effort to get the U.S. involved. So I would think that although this appears to be a total break today, it's likely that a month from now it will appear less than that. I think the more basic problem is what Ian was saying. The U.S. is now in a very different position vis-a-vis Russia and Europe than in my lifetime, and that's going to be harder to fix. Trump, for some reason, sees his mission as reaching out to Vladimir Putin and bringing him into a peace deal, make peace. He said he's going to do it in 24 hours, but that's his priority. To accomplish that, he's done an extraordinary range of things. Insulting our ally Ukraine in the Oval Office is one, but one that's even more striking in some ways is the report that our Secretary of Defense has told the Cyber Command to stop aggressive cyber operations against Russia, at least for the period of these negotiations, as, again, a way to woo Putin into discussions. So, these are, hard to imagine that we would be telling Cyber Command at a time when Russia still conducts intense offensive operations against the U.S. to stand down on some of these.